Hi everyone. In this video we're going to look at the types of displays for quantitative variables. We have four main types. We have box plots, histograms, dot plots, and stem and leaf diagrams. We're going to look at box plots in Chapter 3, specifically Chapter 3.3. In Chapter 2, we're going to look at histograms, stem and leaf diagrams, and dot plots. And of these three, histograms are by far the most important. So just like bar graphs, we can look at histograms in terms of their relative frequency or their frequency. Sorry, this is the frequency, this is the relative frequency. So remember that frequency means counts and relative frequency means percentages or proportions. When we're constructing histograms, and your book goes into this in great detail, we have to construct them using bins or classes, and every data value that we have will fall into that bin. If you have a space in a histogram, it means that you have an empty bin. So for example, right there I have a space within the histogram, and therefore it just means that the bin right here does not have any data values. Some people assume that if there's a space like this, anything after it is an outlier. That's not always the case. And you can also have outliers that don't have any space before them. So it could be that this is an outlier here. We don't know. We couldn't call these possible outliers at this point, but when we're in Chapter 3 and we start to construct box plots and we get some formulas for determining outliers, then we'll be able to say whether or not a data value is actually an outlier. A lot of people get histograms and bar graphs mixed up. A key thing is to know what is being displayed. So remember that bar graphs are for qualitative data and histograms are for quantitative data. But another key aspect is that histograms will not have space between the bars, whereas bar graphs will. And again, a space in a histogram just means that there's an empty bin. But you can see that there's not an equal amount of space between each bar. There's no space whatsoever. The other two types of displays that we have for quantitative data are the stem and leaf diagram and the dot plot. So this first one right here, this is a stem and leaf diagram. And these are a little bit tricky to read at first. This one shows colons between the 10 spot and the data values, but sometimes there's a line here. So it might look like that. And so when you're reading this, when you see the 5 colon or the 5 line 38, it means that you have two data values, a data value of 53 and 58. So this one here would be read 60, 65, and 68. Stem and leaf diagrams are good if you have a small amount of data, a really small amount of data. And you could, if you turned it sideways, you could see that this is going to kind of look like a histogram if you were to make these all, the bins here. So it's going to look the same shape as a histogram, just turned on its side. Then we have dot plots. And I have an example of dot plots here, but you're basically putting a dot where you have the value for each data point. And again, these work well if you have a small amount of data. If you start to have a large amount of data, sometimes the dots start to meld together and you can't really read it very well.